awareness about pressing issues such as child exploitation. We share stories, photos, videos, documentaries that show the exploitation faced by children. And in a way, it helps demonstrate the urgency to address these issues. So that's why it's important to us. The other thing, as Terdedelum Netherlands or TDH, we believe that impact stories humanize the numbers. Yeah, they help put real faces and voices to our work, allowing audiences to connect emotionally with the lives that we have touched and the people we have supported beyond the data we normally share with them. And through publishing compelling stories, we inform and persuade policymakers, donors, and even general public to take our action, join our mission to stop child exploitation, and also help advocate for systemic change. Through impact stories, we also demonstrate our commitment to being, just go back. Oh, yeah. Through impact stories, we demonstrate our commitment to being accountable and transparent. Of course, when we share real examples and evidence of the tangible outcomes of our interventions, it helps reinforce our trust with our partners, donors, and stakeholders as well. And also, impact stories are important to us. They showcase lessons learned, innovative approaches, and challenges faced in addressing issues such as child labor or child trafficking. And when we share these stories, we not only educate ourselves, but also empower other organizations to learn and adopt some of our best practices. Yes, so moving on to the value add of our case stories. As an organization, we have seen the value addition of documenting impact stories. One of them is increased visibility and awareness of our programs, achievements, and impact. And I'll give a very, very good example. We've actually submitted our impact stories and videos in an award here in Kenya, and we won the award not once, but twice. And it's called the DIA Awards. We won the category for the best NGO promoting human rights in Kenya. Yeah, twice in a row. Thank you for the reaction. And we do hope to continue submitting our impact stories and documentaries in other awards this year, like the NGO Awards, to help showcase our work and increase our brand recognition, awareness, and what we call brand equity. Through documenting impact stories, we have seen strengthened relationships with donors who want to continue working with us, and of course, other stakeholders as well. And the impact stories have helped us showcase real examples, again, like I mentioned, the emotional aspect and how our programs are positively impacting children. And this has helped, of course, our stakeholders to see the impact, and we've strengthened our relationships with them. We've also secured additional funding and donations as a result of sharing our impact stories. And we've done this very successfully. Even our fundraising team have met their targets over and over again when we run our campaigns, our fundraising campaigns, and also our awareness raising campaigns. To add to that, impact stories have been powerful in terms of helping us capture the interest of journalists. Now they want to learn more. Yeah, we got an opportunity for one of our Dutch journalists who wants to come to visit Madagascar to really expose child labor situation happening. And we do plan to collaborate with more journalists. And in a way, once they do the feature stories and everything, it will help us magnify our awareness in more credible and trustworthy media platforms, which is a plus for us, definitely. Next. So how do we go about writing impact stories? As TDH, we have adopted an ethical content policy. And this is a policy that governs how we should manage impact story documentation. So what is our definition of an ethical content policy? The policy outlines the processes of collecting, producing, using, and managing content in an ethical way. And the policy ensures that we uphold safeguarding and respect and dignity of the children we support. We developed the ethical content policy and launched it actually in March last year. Why did we do this? We wanted a policy that ensures that we uphold one of the most important core principles for our organization, which is placing children at the center of the work we do. We also decided to develop a policy that is in line with living our values of being human-centered, responsible, bold, and playful. We also wanted to adhere to the core humanitarian standard on quality and accountability and provide clear direction to all staff and all our partners who are involved in documenting impact stories. So in this session, I will cover the 3 phases of the ethical content policy. One of them is story gathering. The second one is story creation. And the third one is story use. And I'll mention some of the key processes that we implement as TDH in each phase. So under story gathering, over and above the many plans that we normally have and logistics and everything, what we do as communications is carry out a risk assessment. And here we identify all the risks that children might be exposed to before, during, and after the content gathering. And then we calculate each risk and assess its likelihood and impact. And then we formulate mitigation strategies. And we have a template that is used across the organization for this risk assessment, which is shared by the safeguarding officer and also our global communications manager before we proceed with anything. So that's an important step that we take. The next step is we also form an ethical content collection team, and this has to be a team with experience in trauma-informed care, a team with a deep understanding of child exploitation, and a team that is familiar with children, the culture, and the context in which the communities we go to operate in. And then we also write a content brief. This brief, which can be shared with all the teams in the organization, gives us an overview of the story collection exercise. We outline details such as goals, our target audience, what we aim to produce, how we plan to use the impact stories, and also we add links to examples of finished products that we've done for reference. In addition to the brief, we identify children for the story collection exercise, and this again is a very, very important step. And we review some criteria. It may not be applicable to all organizations here, but I'll just share some examples of how we go with the identification. We select children who are project participants. We don't call them beneficiaries anymore, in line with our inclusive language. So we choose children who are project participants or children who will soon be project participants. No one with outside that scope. We also choose children who will not be harmed by participating or sharing their stories. We choose children who are empowered and in charge of their own agency, and children who are better placed to share their stories willingly without facing the risk of re-traumatization. And we work closely with our partners on this selection, and we also have counselors. It's a requirement for us to have a counselor or social worker with experience in counseling to support us with collecting stories, and they conduct pre-counseling sessions to determine whether the children can actually participate in the interviews. We also obtain informed consent, which is again very important. And in this process, we take the children and their parents or guardians through all the details of our story documentation exercise. We explain the purpose of the stories, how we tend to use the stories. We also discuss risks. Yeah, it's a dialogue. So we discuss the risks and different aspects such as compensation, withdrawal of content, all those details that are discussed in the informed consent dialogue. And during this process, we allow children to ask any questions they might have. If they don't wish to proceed with the exercise, we tell them it's okay. But if they want to continue and if they are comfortable with the information shared, we request them to sign the consent form or record an audio with them giving consent. And that will help us know that it's okay for us to proceed with documentation. And that once that's done, we proceed to prepare and conduct the interviews. And in most cases, we actually have a case story template that has specific questions that highlight the story in 3 sections. And we can share the template with you if you need. So we have before, during, and after the intervention, just specific questions to guide anyone in the organization to be able to conduct the interview. And during the interviews, we ensure that we do not ask direct questions about sensitive issues, and we do not ask questions that might re-traumatize a child. And like I mentioned, having a counselor or social worker with experience in counseling is a very important thing that we do as TDH.
Grace, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
5? Okay. All right, thank you, Agnes. So in phase 2, of course, we collect and review all the stories and photos that we've worked on. We try to retain the original narrative as shared by the children in the field and ensure we use accurate quotes as per what the children shared. We also apply what we call the triangle of risk. An example will be in our stories, we used anonymized names, of course. We ensure that we hide identities where applicable. And we also ensure we do not reveal any location of a child that people can easily identify. We also use inclusive language and ensure we do not reinforce stereotypes. As for the photos, we refer to a hidden identities guide, and it provides more details on when to show a recognizable face and when not to. And we have examples, for example, would not show faces of survivors of sexual exploitation or trafficking. And what we do alternatively is try to find creative ways to take photos that tell a story without putting the child's faces or revealing the faces. And one of the things we'll do at the end, of course, in the presentation, we'll show you some examples of pictures that are taken that are still powerful. They still tell a story, but they're not, they do not we do not reveal the faces of the child. And then once the stories and photos are ready, we make sure that we conduct aftercare. Before we publish. This is a step, we never had this as an organization, but now we are very keen because we understand the importance. We need to go back to the children and the parents, show them the final products, show them the photos, show them the stories, allow them to give feedback and renewed consent for us to proceed to publish. And once this is done and they're happy, we get sign off done. We store the photos and stories and consent forms securely as governed by the Kenya Data Protection Act and GDPR law. And then we proceed to publish. Next. So, and the next phase is story use. So we publish the stories in different channels, the website, social media, newsletter. We have different channels in the organization. We monitor any performance, how the stories are performing, and any feedback that we receive on different channels. And then we proactively check in with children, especially those with social media handles. We just want to check, have they received any feedback? how do they feel? So that proactive check-in, we strongly advise you to consider that as well. And as per the ethical content policy, we remove content within 3 to 5 working days if a child withdraws consent at any point in time, and we have a process on how to do that. And then we remove all materials from the database and channels after 3 years. And yes, after 3 years, we will definitely withdraw, remove, do away with all the materials that you've captured. Yeah. And that is all about the ethical content policy. As an organization, we want to ensure that we strictly adhere to this policy moving forward. We want to ensure that we put children at the center of the work we do and do no harm to them as we gather, produce, and use our impact stories. So now we just want to hear from you. I know it was very brief, but we have detailed policy with all the details. We just want to learn from you. What are some of the ethical guidelines that you adopt within your organization? Is there anything new that you've had that you don't adopt yet and you want to do so? You can answer that on chat. We can take your responses on chat if that's okay. Please go back to the question. Agnes, somehow I can't see the chat. Could you let me know if someone has mentioned anything?
Oh, the chat, not yet. I think the question for those on the call is, what are some of the ethical guidelines you adopt within your organization? And having listened to this sharing by Grace, what is new to you? Just drop something in the chat as we proceed. Thank you.
We can give the team a minute or so, I think. But in case there's any response, just let me know so that I
Grace, you could proceed as they write. I see some answers are coming in. You can probably proceed and we shall check shortly.
Yes, I'll check the chat and respond because aftercare is new and a good thing to consider. Yes, it is. Yeah, we owe it to the children and the parents to go back and show them the work we've done. And if they're okay with it, we can comfortably proceed with our campaigns. Yeah, so it's very important. Is there any other before I conclude?
There was one which somebody said we ensure we get the informed consent and assent. I think just reaffirming what you shared, your practice.
Yes. So, and we have adopted the informed consent as a dialogue. You know, previously you just read through the consent form, then ask someone to sign, but they need to understand the entire purpose, the risks, everything that is involved in you documenting impact stories. And once they're comfortable with everything, that's when they sign the consent form. So informed consent as a dialogue is very, very important. All right, I will check the chat after I hand over to my next presenter, but just key considerations as program practitioners or as a team working in our line of work. I encourage you to understand your why, how, and what I've mentioned, why impact stories are important, how to go about producing powerful impact stories in different formats. It can be videos, photos, written. And then what makes a good impact story that will inspire and move your audiences. The three elements that we mentioned at the beginning. I also encourage you to ensure ethical, inclusive communication. And we can no longer compromise on ethics in our line of work. I know that there's time pressure. I know we have to deliver this, but we need to take deliberate effort and enough time to ensure that the final stories that you produce are in line with the ethical standards that you have in your organization. And stakeholders, especially donors nowadays, they are looking to us to ensure we safeguard and do no harm to the children we support. And please ensure you apply the existing safeguarding protocols in your organization. And of course, consult. We do have a safeguarding officer who guides us on the gray areas or anything that we face in the field and we need more guidance on. So we have that support in place, which is very important. The other thing before, how much time do you have, Agnes? Two things and then I conclude. Yes, Agnes? Agnes, do you still have time?
Our time is up and it's just for you to, as you see on the screen.
Yes. So as I wind up, we do not talk much about well-being, and which you should. So, and you can easily face secondary trauma as you interview children and hear their stories. So please talk to someone after you conduct interviews and seek counseling if required. We do have a counseling team based in the Netherlands that supports us in case we need to share about our experiences in the field. So that's very important. And last but not least, do not feel overwhelmed. You learn by doing, and this is a common phrase here in TDH. So you can learn by doing. Practice, learn, collect some stories, try to write them, try it on your own, and you will comfortably take up this exciting challenge of documenting impact stories. So thank you so much. That is all from me. Over to you, Agnes. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Grace. You are in Nairobi, but I feel like you are here at IIDC. The learning has been immense. The ethics, the tools, the well-being, including having counselors on the team as you did up storytelling, documentation, are all key areas that I feel are very essential you have pointed out. Asante sana, and thank you for those giving us Makofi online. We want to put a short comma there and first proceed to hear from our colleague, Hilda Ngaja from Tanzania. Yes, Hilda, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Agnes, and good morning, team. Still morning. And this is my presentation. I'm going to present about the rescue and the protection of abused children, challenges and basic practices. We have seen that during the documenting of impact stories, there is a lot of re-victimizing children. Instead of helping them, we are making them more victims because we want sometimes to sell our stories or to make our stories very interesting and people to be interested to watch them or to see them. But in other ways, we are victimizing these children. So I'm going to share today the practice that Raising Up Friendship Foundation is doing. And this is what I'm going to share with you. I'll have to introduce you to Raising Up Friendship Foundation because I'm sure that a lot of us don't know about this organization. And then I'm going to share how we are utilizing and how we gain the impact stories. And then our learnings, recommendations, and impact stories, documentations, our procedures, and everything. Thank you, Agnes. This is Introduction to Raising Up Friendship Foundation. RUFO started a television program revealing these children abuse cases and it was a television program for more than 5 years. And then it has transformed to the NGO registered one with the mission of promoting positive parenting and safeguarding children's rights. And our vision is to create a society where every child is protected from violence and abuse. This is Raising Up Friendship Foundation. So our work at Raising Up Friendship has three, I can say, focus. Focus number one is prevention. We are working to conduct community sensitization programs to raise awareness about child's rights and effects of violence. By doing that, we are making sure that violence against children is prevented. And also we prevent by implementing school-based clubs such as Life Skills Club, and equip children with knowledge, resilience to avoid risky situations. Also, we run parenting workshops to promote positive parenting techniques and prevent abuse at home. Another component is rescue. At Raising Up Friendship Foundation, we operate a helpline for reporting cases of child abuse and violence. We call also this helpline is visible or is seen in our television programs because we have a television program. So all the people all over the country are reporting these abuse cases. And also we collaborate with local authorities and social workers to remove children from harmful environment. This is due to Tanzania National Plan of Action that we have to work hand in hand with local authorities, especially social workers when it comes to the issues of children welfare. Also, we provide temporary shelter. We have partners who have shelters, and when we see the children at home are not safe, we give them the temporary shelter before we settle things, and sometimes we take them back. And also a safety for rescue children while seeking long-term solution. And another component is response. We offer psychosocial support and counseling to children and families affected with violence. We also work with law enforcement and the legal teams to ensure that justice for victims are served. And we had several cases in court right now, and some we already got justice, and children we can say that the justice has been served, apart from the fact that they are out of that abusive environment. And also we facilitate reintegration programs for children to return safe to the supportive environment, because we are the ones who are not believing in staying in keeping children in centers. We believe that they can grow well in their families or the people in their families. So the impact story. Agnes. Okay. Impact stories is actually I can say we have the traditional ways of documenting our stories, and those most of the time were more harmful of children, and the impact story is more to humanity and preventing more harm to these children who have been facing this abuse. So this is how Raising Up Friendship Foundation document our impact stories, which align with Tanzania National Plan of Action for the Protection of Children. Step number one, we are collecting initial reports. We have several ways of collecting in these reports. People are reporting through our social media pages. Others are calling through our helpline numbers and give us story that we have these children who are facing this child abuse. After that, we have to sit as a team and do and validate the stories, because we receive a lot of stories, and in some stories we have to make sure that others are given to other organizations or to the government authorities. But we are sitting and confirm the authenticity and the relevance of the story by gathering basic details from the source. So we call back all those people who share their stories with us. If we see the social media pages, we have to ask them to give them their phone number so that we get details. And of course, we are protecting them because others don't want to be revealed. After that, we are looking for story relevance. We have to assess if the story aligns with the organization mission and goals. If it's not aligning, we are looking for organizations which are doing, which are aligned, their mission and mission align with the particular stories. And most of the time, we are working with these regional and ward social workers to, if the stories we know that this is not the areas which we are dealing with, we transfer them, because sometimes other people has more knowledge than what we have in the things that we are not doing. After that, we are looking for impact significance. We determine the story's potential to highlight meaningful change. Conduct interviews with subjects of the story, program staffs, and other stakeholders, because we must have the details of the story. Sometimes we are doing observation. We are visiting the relevant location to observe and document the outcome in the first hand. After receiving the calls or messages, we have to visit and see what is happening. Even if it's by far, even if it's school, we stay at school and we observe. And we are collecting supporting evidence like photos, videos, or documents that can collaborate the story. Then we are starting to draft the story. The structure, we organize the story into a clear narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. And then also we are starting with the introduction. We present the background and the challenge phase. We are the second part is intervention. We describe organization actions and solutions, because before documenting the story, we have to do the intervention first. We can't just share the story without intervention. And then we will share the outcome. We highlight the positive changes experienced by the beneficiary. And then number 4, which during the drafting of the story, is the tone. We use a respectful and empowering tone that preserve the dignity of those involved. These involved could be children, parents, guardians, the people who are involved in that story. After that, we review and validate the story. We are conducting internal review. We share the draft with relevant staff for feedback and ensure factual accuracy. So after writing the whole story, drafting the whole story, we share it with the relevant staff who go through the whole story and see how relevant it is and how preventive it is. Then of course, we are looking for the beneficiary's consent before even disseminating the story, because they can have the consent of collecting the story. If we have to go back and ask them if it's okay now to share these stories, even if their names are not there, even if their real names are not there, even if their faces are not there, but we have to ask for their consent just to share the story. After that, we finalize the story and editing. We polish the narrative for clarity and impact, and then we include visual captions to make story engaging, and then we share stories to different platforms. We're using social media. Sometimes we share them to donors. We prepare some presentation to share to stakeholders and those people who we think that they can have impact to those stories. And we are sharing all the stories to the target audience. After that, we are doing monitoring and learning. We gather response from audience to understand the story impact, because we don't just share our stories. We want to see how people affected by the story, because through this story, we expect changes in the society. And then we sit down as a team and reflect on the process to improve the future documentation. Agnes? Okay, how are we using these stories? We're using these stories for advocacy and awareness. We highlight key issues affecting children and advocating for change. We use these impact stories for donor engagement. We demonstrating transparency, accountability, and tangible results of funding. Also for internal learning, helping the organization to reflect on success and areas for improvement. After every story, Raising Up Friendship Foundation has a learning story which help us to do better in the other story. Also, we are using these stories for public relations, building credibility and trust by showcasing Rufo's dedication to child protection. And through these stories, it just put Raising Up Friendship Foundation in the spotlight of the organization for child protection. So when you mentioned some organization which are dealing with child protection in Tanzania, Raising Up Friendship Foundation will be in the list because we share these stories in a dignity manner, so that it gives us credibility. Also, enhancing credibility, strengthen the organization reputation among stakeholders. Also, increase funding opportunity provided, compelling evidence of impact to attract donors. And I can say right now we have a lot of I can say pending discussions on people who want to support us, organization and donors who want to support us on the issue of prevention of violence against children. This is all thanks to these impact stories. And we use these stories to empower beneficiaries. We amplify the voices of children and the communities, highlighting their resilience and urgency. When we share our stories, we get a lot of calls and messages from even decision makers in this country asking, what did this happen? Is this case over? How are we going to chip in? Did you involve local authorities? Something like that. Also improve strategies. Okay. These stories guides better decision making through lesson learned from documented stories. So next, Agnes, I can see the time is running. Next, Agnes, recommendations. Our recommendation to all of us is to adapt survivor-centered approach. We believe in this approach. We prioritize the safety, dignity, and consent of children and families. This is our number one priority, the dignity and safety of the families and children. And number two, Agnes, enhance training and capacity building. We have to equip our staff with the skills in ethical interviewing and the trauma-informed care. Our staffs, most of the time, especially these upcoming NGOs, we just we employ a person this morning. After 5 minutes, a person is in the field, and they don't know this procedure. They are not trained. Let's invest in capacity building and train them on how to make sure that they are aligned with the law and everything. Utilize local knowledge. Don't ignore local people who you meet in those areas where you are going to document your impact stories. Engage community leaders and local stakeholders to ensure cultural, sensitive, and accurate documentation. This helped us a lot. And there are cases where we were working with the chiefdom kingdom in one of our region in Tanzania. It was really helpful, and we get a very good impact story, and everybody was happy. So don't ignore these local knowledges. Streamline documentation process. Develop a clear guideline and tools as the organization to simplify the collection and validation of impact stories. We have been using that a lot, and that helps us to do the impact story, to document these impact stories without re-victimizing children. And if it's necessary, we have to seek this advice how to create these guidelines so that children who are our beneficiaries could be safe while we are documenting these impacted stories. By saying so, thank you so much for listening. And I have a video here. Agnes, can I go through this video, or you're going to share the link?
I think we're going to share the link with the slides after because our time is constrained. Thank you very, very much, Hilda.
Agnes.
Can I have some e-claps, please? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Raising Friendship Foundation. You leave us with lots of areas to reflect on. The survivor-centered approach, utilizing local knowledge, paying attention to culture, being sensitive to culture, and being accurate in our documentation. Thank you very, very much. So next on schedule is our third and final presenter, Madam Caroline Namutebi. You are welcome to take the floor.
Thank you so much, Agnes, for moderating, and thank you, Hilda and Agnes, for very powerful presentations. You have made my work easier because most of the things have been mentioned. I am Caroline, working with Child Health and Development Center, which is a center of excellence and sustainable interdisciplinary center that is located within Makerere University College of Health Sciences and School of Medicine, with a mission to promote the well-being of children and women in Uganda through multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral research, teaching, and training. And we do this by building partnerships with the organizations such as NGOs, development partners, and government itself. We have 9 programs within the department, but I belong to the Families, Parenting and Children's Health Program that is led by Dr. Sue Godfrey, whom many of us in this world of violence prevention know very well. And under our program, we have a number of projects, just as you listed up there. But for this conversation around documentation of impact stories, I'll focus on one, the Parenting for Respectability program. Next. The PFR, or the Parenting for Respectability program, takes a research. Excuse me, just a minute. I have. So the Parenting for Respectability program takes an approach of research and involves the recruitment and training of both men and women through structured parenting sessions. And later these are evaluated to assess the effectiveness within the prevention of violence against children, but also the interspousal violence. It is delivered to groups of 15 to 20, and the facilitators undergo through a training of about a week to receive competences on the delivery mechanism of the program, but as well as understand the content. For when we are doing research, Makerere University is academia, so we do a lot of research. We have another city, but within that, we nest a qualitative arm within the randomized control trials that we do. And so we get the stories, the impact stories through in-depth interviews, through focus group discussions, key informants, but we also do video clips and pictures, photography. So those are the key methods in which we get these stories on board. Okay. I know that we have already gone through what an impact story is, but I'm here to say that these are they compile narrative and experiences that demonstrate how the project, the program, or research initiative has made the practical, visible, and tangible differences in the lives of individuals and the community. So since these stories must actually illustrate change, we need to make sure that we are addressing something. If you're to document a story, what are you addressing? So the challenge or the problem is a key component while we want to document stories. We also need to know or to get an idea of what action has happened so that we can qualify it to be an impact story. What intervention has been delivered? In this case, it would be the parenting program. And then we need to also document the change. And when we are doing this, we need to be able to illustrate how this can qualify to be evidence of impact, and also continue to study the broader implication of this in the lives of the individuals, the community, but also how it informs programming and research. So how does THDC document impact stories? Evidence-based interventions require commitment from the team to document qualitative data. And as we know, this is always along with the quantitative data. So we have mentioned these processes, but I will just re-echo some of this, that the consenting process is very important. And being a research institution, we go through the process of ethical approval for all the work that we do until when we get the final approval of the Uganda Research Council of Sciences and Technology. That is when we actually go to the field. And going through these processes of ethical approval, we follow the consenting process just as the two presenters have highlighted, to make sure that parents, adults consent, children assent, and also parents consent on behalf of their children. So the issue of confidentiality is very important as you're doing the qualitative component of the study, but also to say that as Hilda mentioned, that we make sure that we have the skilled staff for the role, for the different regions and parts of the country where we work. So the next step would be documentation of the story and analysis. So Child Health and Development Center, many times as a program, we use Atlas, and such programs will make your stories easier for publication, because then Atlas will help us to come up with the themes, the sub-themes, and also to make sure that our work is systematically documented. And then later, as the last presenter has said, these stories are reviewed by the storyteller, the person who told us the story. And if it is a picture, yes, the picture is taken back to the field for people to see if that is really what they want to be presented out there. And as someone said, as we are doing all this work, we need to be consistent with the norms and the cultures of these communities where we do our work. So how does Child Health and Development Center use the impact stories for our evidence-based interventions? Someone has already mentioned that statistics alone without a human feeling may not make meaning to many of us. And then we also know that emphasis is on how putting research into practice, because evidence is not just about numbers. So when we use these stories, they help to make our data human and necessary for us to inform programming as well as influence policy. Then the other thing is that they illustrate the impact of the program and policies. So when we break down the evidence-based interventions into specific measurable tasks, and then we assign this to individuals and we are able to get this data. When I said data, I actually mean the impact stories. These are able to influence the way that we work. They're able to help us make changes in the way that we deliver interventions. Just to cite an example, while developing materials for a partner, for example, like for Children's Rights and Violence Prevention Fund, you might not use the same pictures when you're doing the same work for the government of Uganda, for example, the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development, because you might need to illustrate impact for them at different levels, and different case studies might be needed to be brought on board. And then we also use these stories for advocacy and also to influence the broader organization goal. Since we work within the university, we are also trying to influence the community of practice within the university, that interventions are not only developed for academia, but they have to reach the final user. And many times these are the beneficiaries, the parents, for the work that we do. So when we come up with these impact stories, then we are able to locally use them here within the university to advocate for the work that we do, but we are also able to use them at national level to influence policy, which is very important for our work. And relatedly, data-driven decisions. You cannot make decisions to scale, to adapt interventions when you're only relying on quantitative data. So for us to make data-driven decisions, we use a lot of impact stories because they help us to listen in to the voices of the people. And once we do this, we change the materials that we have to make sure that they suit the different communities that are adapting our programs. And to give the same example that I provided, you realize that when we are adapting interventions for example, Kenya, under the Children's Rights and Violence Prevention, the same program will have different illustrations or pictures for a program that is delivered in Tanzania. Why? Because we are using the data that is coming from people's stories and voices to influence the program itself. And lastly, building collaborations. It is one of the best ways you can strengthen collaborations when you're able to show your work in a human way. And it does not only strengthen the collaborations, it even helps to outsource, because people will read about your work. And when they read about your work, they'll see the stories, they'll see the illustrations that as a result of that work. So then it is easier to build those networks, strengthen them, and also continue to scale and build interventions that work to reach many people in communities. And how do impact stories influence or impact practice? They give implementers confidence to scale up parenting interventions. If you are an implementer and you see what is happening, you hear, you listen in what is happening, it gives you a lot of confidence to continue doing the same work. Also to appreciate the changes that you need to make. And relatedly, it helps evidence-based intervention developers organize materials to fit the community needs as per the community lived experiences and cultural practices. I have already explained that in the previous slide. They help in understanding the variations between different service delivery points and the possible collaborations to maintain and scale up interventions like those that focus on parenting. You realize that parenting interventions, especially those that are delivered face-to-face, require different service points. So without listening in to the voices of peoples, you might continue delivering face-to-face interventions, yet actually you need to go to digital. You might plan to find people at a particular point of service, yet actually you need to change the timing and also the point of delivery. So the stories help us to do that. And also lead the creation of a community of practice. When we share these stories, we are creating a community of practice within the communities themselves, but also within implementers of parenting programs, such as the one that we deliver.
Excuse me.
Next. So how do impact stories influence policy and programming? Evidence-based testimonies and stories guide stakeholders to develop policy briefs. We all know that policymakers, people that normally work with government, they will not come and read our reports, our annual reports, quarter reports. But because it is easier to place an impact story in a policy brief, this will then help them, for them to appreciate our program and then make decisions that can later guide policy guidelines on how to adapt or scale up interventions such as parenting. And also the findings that come from the impact stories, they prompt policymakers to formulate policies in respect to the proposed recommendations. They enhance easy identification of gaps in the current policies, because then the stories will explain the challenges, will also sometimes propose mitigation structures, and these will be an easy place to actually motivate policymakers like those. And they also motivate policymakers to advocate for the program and integrate it into their programming. For a program like parenting, we know that if government takes on, government has a lot of resource to support scale and adaptation. So making sure that they get interested in our work in the best way we can, such as use of impact stories, would be interesting to influence such a category of influencers. And then for programming, they guide the adaptation process of a program, for example, a parenting program. They help evidence-based developers to adapt programs for scale. It also helps on how to contribute to sustainability of a program. So it will help us to know, do we need to scale down? Do we need to scale up? Do we need to layer to make sure that people are able to benefit from a particular program? They also contribute to strategically planned program planning. So depending on the findings that are coming from impact stories, organizations and programs are able to step back and reflect upon their strategy and see how to align their strategy or align their work to fit the communities that they are meeting. And then they hope to showcase the relevance of working with different stakeholders at all levels for successful implementation. Because these stories are not only for the beneficiaries, but also practitioners in the field, policymakers, and also development partners. So these stories will showcase on how relevant we need to collaborate in order to benefit from each other as we scale up implementations within our communities. And then lastly, it can be a source of attracting funding so that we can increase our reach and the reach of the programs. These are some of the recommendations that we put up for us. We think that for you to be able to conduct a very good impact story, you need to do a very good needs assessment. So in your research, in your protocol for ethical approval, you must make sure that you do a very good literature review, identify the gaps. So this will be like a guide for the qualitative team to develop the guidelines that are in relation to the gaps, but also to ensure that the tools we are using to do the data collection will later meet the gaps that were identified in our needs assessment. So that is one thing that we need to take note of. It has already been mentioned that we need to do staff training. If you're doing, for example, working in 3 countries, like for some of the work that we do at the Child Health and Development Center, you need to make sure that you build capacity of all the qualitative data collection team in the different countries to actually do the interviews and also observe. Because documenting a story is not about following the tool that you went with in the community, but you need to take into consideration what you're observing, when to take the story, when is the right time, when is not the right time, who are the right people, which other data do you need. All this needs someone that has the right skills. and then evaluation and dissemination. We need to make sure that as a program in violence prevention, we sing the same song until everyone sings it. Since we are all working in an area that is relatively new, we need to make sure that we evaluate our work and then disseminate it intentionally. When we do that, people will understand, will appreciate the value of violence prevention, but also the value of the topic that we are talking about. Because many publishers don't actually take on impact stories as data that we can publish. So it is until when we show the relevance and how carefully we are documenting these stories that it will also be easier for us to publish this work and make it very known out there. So all we do, whenever we do this work, because qualitative studies, you really relate with the individuals. It is many times one-on-one. We need to be culturally sensitive, make sure that the work is sustainable in the community, and take into consideration all the ethical obligations that you have as an organization and as an entity. Thank you. Next. Thank you very much. I want to appreciate the people that contribute to this work, the collaborators in different ways, the local partners, that is Children's Rights and Violence Prevention, which is a local funding organization, and the Center for Transformative Parenting, where I partly belong, because the work that you do help us to learn. Thank you. Agnes, over to you.
Wow, thank you very, very much, Caroline. Very, very interesting perspectives from the research angle on how impact stories are actually undertaken, their use, and how these are actually transforming programs and policy decision making. I will not add a thing to what you've said, but just as we move away from hearing from you and us moving into engaging, I want to challenge all of us on this call to say that impact stories actually are, I think, the best thing that we can do. If you saw the last slide of Caroline, you can see how many partners they have, even when they are doing child violence prevention from a research angle, integrating into program. So I want to invite right now my colleague, Dennis Ratemo, to take us through the next session. Over to you, Dennis.
All right, thank you so much, Agnes. Sincere thank you to Grace, Hilda, and Caroline for sharing very good insights on impact story documentation. We now have the opportunity, about 10 or so minutes, for participants to then ask any questions or make comments that will add value to this particular process. So if you've got a question, a comment, please raise your hand digitally, and then of course you will be unmuted to ask your question. But then before we go into members asking questions orally, there are those that already came in on the chat, and I want to start with those. There was a question from CDF Tanzania. That's what is coming here as the account. And the question is impact story same as success stories? It was more or less the same question that Stephen Kasule asked. What is the difference between impact story and story of change? So maybe any of the presenters would want to attempt to that as we wait for more questions. The difference between impact story and story of change.
Hello.
Yes, Caroline, please go ahead.
Yes, I would say that a story of change is a story that comes from the work that we do when we do not necessarily do the research component of how we gather the stories. For example, if I am in an NGO in a district and I got funding to implement parenting interventions, and when I go to monitor and supervise, I get those stories. So many times I do not have a guide on how to document these stories, but I receive them the way they are. And then impact stories, I would say, in my opinion, that these are stories that are intentional at the time of proposal writing, at the time of programming, at the time of ethical approval. So you have done the development tools or guides, you have gone through them, you assess them, then you use them to go and get these stories. And when you come to come and write what we are calling the documentation of the stories, you're actually analyzing them, and you have a standard method of how you're doing the analysis of the stories, and they are carefully reviewed, and so you can claim that you can publish it, so it is an impact story. That is what I would think. But
Thank
the
you.
other presenters can make a contribution.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Hilda, Grace, any addition to that?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, let me add a little bit. Caroline said it all, but I think story of change or mostly focus on, I can say, transformative journey, showing challenges faced, steps taken, progress, and it's capture a person change over time. While the impact story highlights the direct results, for example, of a child protection effort, such as show an initiative improved a child safety is more observed in the impact story. The difference, I think, is how prevented children are in these two things. The story of change can even show, it can reveal the I can say the subject, while the impact story is more to preventing the dignity and everything. Like the story of change can be the old way a little bit, but the impact story could be the modern one, which is good and safe for child protection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilda. Grace, you wanted to add something? I saw your hand.
No, it's okay. The presenters have explained it very, very well.
All right. Okay, thank you so much again for responding to those questions. So I can't see any other questions on the chat. The others are just comments.
There is a question. There is a question, yes, that was asking, I think this is directed to Grace. They were asking, how do you disseminate your impact stories until it gave you so much visibility, even to media?
Oh yeah, there's that question from CDF Tanzania. Grace, how do you disseminate your impact stories until it gave you so much visibility, even on the medias?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And this is where having a communications team on board to support you with the dissemination really comes in handy. So for all our content, the stories, videos, and photos, we do have always a dissemination plan, and that always includes how we want to raise visibility on the stories on our online and offline channels. So once we work on the stories internally, we see how best to package them in a way that they will be newsworthy to journalists. It can be videos or different formats. Sometimes just to give an actual example for the documentary, the video that was shown at the beginning, we had a very, very clear dissemination plan. Yeah, we selected the stories at that time. Also during documentation, we wanted to have an angle that would interest not only our audiences but also media. And then I remember we shared a press release on World Children's Day. So we identified a key moment that gets a lot of media coverage and attention. we shared a press release with the links to the documentaries, with the links to our website where all the stories are. Yeah, and journalists were really interested to either do, I remember in Madagascar, we did a feature story, and the Dutch journalists that I talked to you about, they want to go to Madagascar as well. So we have different ways to do it, and it's very intentional. Of course, you know, relationships with media, they have to be built over time. And we want to have that, to establish ourselves as the go-to expert organization on everything to do with child exploitation. So we build relationships with them. We identify them, even things like just checking the media conversations, who's writing an article, if we can reach out to them, invite them to some of our events just to build a strong rapport with them, field visits, launches, press releases, press conferences. We try to build that relationship and for them to see the work we're doing. So there's an aspect of building relationships over time, making sure we are the top of mind when it comes to any content they need for child labor, child abuse, any other related topic. And then we make deliberate efforts on our social media channels, key international days. We even share our newsletter with some journalists so that they see what's happening within the organization. And also on social media, we follow them, we tag them, you know. So it's a big dissemination plan, you can say, but hopefully you can pick some of the things you can do within your organization to get to that point where media come to you as opposed to you going to them. I hope I've answered that very clear.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Grace. So the essence there is having a clear and elaborate dissemination plan. There is another observation from Stephen Kasule that he picked a good learning, where Grace, you said that you no longer call your project children beneficiaries, but you call them participants. Why? Can you explain briefly?
Yes, I saw that question. It's really a good question that we should ask ourselves as organizations. First of all, just think what comes to mind when you think about benefit and beneficiary. Yeah. So we had this inclusive language guide developed as part of our ethical content policy, because we realized that, first of all, words can be weapons. And they can emphasize inequality and also re-traumatize children, and they have the potential to harm and to have harmful meanings and connotations. So once we understood we need to be careful on the words we use, one of them is beneficiary. So in our guide, we say like that word assumes that all development projects are good and that recipients always benefit, in quotes, from them. So in line with the guide, we were advised to consider other terminologies, and that's why we use the word project participant. We also have a very long list of terminologies. Let me just mention another one. Saying a disabled child can also have a different meaning if incorrectly used. So we use the word child with a disability. And the word victim, which I think most development organizations have really questioned this word, we use the word survivor. Yeah. And if it's not possible, actually, when you're doing the interviews, just ask the project participants how they want to be how they would want to describe themselves. It's really helpful as well. And we have the Luxembourg guidelines, which I think I'll share with Agnes, the link. Again, it was guidelines developed in Luxembourg containing some terminology guidelines for the protection of children from sexual exploitation and abuse. This is very important. You can adopt it as well in your organization. So just remember, language is very, very important. How we use it matters a lot. So just remember that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Grace. And I want to add that actually, like you've just said, it's a language in programming. So when we conventionally been calling children beneficiaries, then they are recipients of our programs, which reduces them to passive recipients of interventions. But then when that shift to calling them participants, it's in the right spirit of having children to become active agents of their change. So it's that kind of a shift that was thought through. I want to check if there is any participant who has raised their hand to ask any question. I can't see any hand raised up. So then the assumption is that it was all clear. So I want us then to do something pretty brief. One would be that I'd want to do a quick analysis of, no, there's a hand from CDF Tanzania. Please go ahead. Help me unmute CDF Tanzania, said that they asked the question.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. I just wanted to get a clear understanding on the difference between the impact story and the success stories.
So the difference between impact story and the success story, I know Caroline and Hilda, you gave a difference between impact story and a story of change. And I know what came out clearly is that an impact story more or less looks at the impact of the program based on what was designed, at the outcome. So it looks at the effect of the project on the outcomes, while a story of change is, it looks at the journey and the process, which also documents the challenges. So it's the evolution, it looks at the change over time. But now there is another introduction of the success story. Can any of the presenters help us understand what a success story is and how different is it from the impact story? So maybe even as we wait for the, yeah, Hilda, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think the if I'll be correct, my colleague here will help me to put it better. I think the success story most of the time it focuses on I can say amplifying the emotions, while the impact story it focused to influence change to the society. This is in a nutshell what I can differentiate between impact story and success story. Success story mostly it shows this, we did this and this and this as an organization, but the impact stories go beyond to that. It goes it goes beyond to what the success story can do. I can still say that the success story and the story of change can be the normal and the traditional ways of documenting stories, which we used even when we are starting the Raising Up Friendship Foundation, we used to document the story of changes, and it was more like making people cry, oh, this child. But the impact story is more preserving the dignity and just show the impact and want the changes in the society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilde. And I can see Osbom has also posted on the chat the difference between an impact story and a success story. So a success story primarily focuses on highlighting an individual organization's achievements and positive outcomes, often emphasizing the win or the accomplishment itself, while an impact story goes deeper to demonstrate the tangible, meaningful change or difference that resulted from those actions. So at times they say that a success story actually focuses on a particular intervention or action, and the story is meant to serve the purpose of like a proof of concept that the initiative has worked or the action is working. So really that will be the essence of a success story. So thank you so much again for that particular question. Let me check again if there's any new hand as we move towards closure. I can't see any new hand. So let me take a minute to summarize a few things that stood out of the presentations from the three eminent ladies. The first thing that was clear is that documentation, story documentation or impact documentation is actually a standard practice within our project cycle management. It is not an add-on. It's not something that as organizations we need to see as additional work. It's actually a standard practice as we implement programs to participants or different actors. It is standard practice that we need to document the effect and impact of our interventions, of our programs. Number two is that impact stories have value to organizations, and this value is either internal or external. Internal issues to do with accountability, learning, adaptation of programs and things like those. External visibility, that it enhances our visibility as organizations, the influencing and advocacy, and even fundraising. So that's critical. Then the other key component that came out of this is that even as we think about impact story documentation, there are key things that we have to consider. And number one, it needs to be ethical, it needs to be safe, it needs to be inclusive. So as we work on this, then it's also asking that we have an ethical protocol, a safeguarding protocol that will guide this particular process, such that as we do our story documentation, we prioritize the well-being of children or participants that we're working with, and that we do not either re-traumatize them or expose them to any form of violence through our documentation. So that again was very critical. I saw colleagues speak something to do with aftercare as a new learning that we picked from here, such that we ensure that this particular exercise does not subject children to any form of abuse. And then the other thing that stood out is that we actually need to do some risk assessment and evaluation before we engage in this impact story documentation. And that will give us a go or no go in terms of putting the documentation together. And this is to ensure that the best interest of the child or the participant is actually taken care of, and all risks that would be associated with that particular exercise are identified or mapped out, and mitigation measures then developed. The second last is that as in it needs to, it needs to have a clear plan. Like we have to plan for impact story documentation. It's not something that will happen either by accident or conveniently. We have to be intentional about it, and intentional means that we have to plan for it. We have to allocate a budget for impact story documentation, and then of course have a clear understanding of the end-to-end process, from planning to collecting the information, to documenting the story, to validating the story, and disseminating the story. So those are some of the things that came out clearly, and I think one of the recommendations that came out from one of the presenters is that we need to actually work on enhancing the capacity of organizations and teams as far as impact documentation is concerned. So those are some of the things that came out of the presentations. So in less than 1 minute before I hand it over to Agnes, I have dropped a link to our Menti, and I'd want us then to highlight what are some of your key takeaways from this session. So please click on the link. I'll also share that presentation. Someone can scan the QR code, and then we document our key takeaways. And then after that, I'll give it back to Agnes. So let's take a minute and document our key takeaways. That will be important for us to assess then whether or not people have learned and the things that they're picking. So I've dropped the link to Menti on the chat, but you can also, if you want to use your phone, you can scan the QR code. And then thank you so much. You already have one response. We have 2 responses already. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. In the next 1 minute, I will hand over to Agnes. So keep them coming. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. We've got 3 responses already. And some of the key takeaways could include what you would want to do differently as programmers, as organizations. Thank you. We have 4 responses now. So I think people can keep on typing this in the next 1 minute, even as I hand over to Agnes to lead us into the conclusion of the webinar. So thank you so very much, the 3 presenters, Carol, Hilda, and Grace, for the invaluable sharing of the insights. Thanks for the good questions from all the participants who've asked questions, both on the chat and orally. And now, thank you so much for even this opportunity to share your key takeaways. I want now to hand it over to Agnes. Back to you, Agnes.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Dennis. I think we all appreciate that the session has been informative. He has summarized very well for us some of the key issues that we need to put into consideration, as well as giving you opportunity to share your feedback in terms of what your key takeaways, the learnings, and what you think you're going to do differently. And I want to say that do not leave this call without giving us your feedback on that, because it is very essential to show that this is important as a platform, or it's not adding value. So if we want to see more learning, more interaction, more connection through this IIDC platform, we need to hear if it's making a difference at your end. And from us, just to appreciate our speakers for the day, you have immensely unpacked the concept of impact story documentation. And I believe everybody here has picked something. What remains is now the ball is in our courts, all of us. How do we apply this knowledge? It's one thing to attend such a webinar, listen in, and get back to business as usual. But I think for us who are committed to making a difference in the lives of children that face violence each and every other day in our communities, it's important that from here we apply this knowledge. And I would like to say that as we apply the knowledge, let's keep sharing through the different platforms that we have. Some of us are on the WhatsApp community. It would be very good, like after this webinar, to hear people interacting in their various country groups, what has been like something thrown out there that's a challenge, and they put it up there and discuss it as a country group, or share what new thing you are doing over time, over the coming weeks. That will show the value addition of this time that we spend here, the 2 hours that we have spent, that they have been useful. We also encourage you to visit the Hub site. We keep adding new resources there that are relevant in the work that we all do around protecting children from violence and different kinds of exploitation. So the Hub site, I believe many of us know it, but there are those who have not even yet subscribed to the Hub. Please do, so that you are kept connected when we share communication about new activities, updates here with us. If you have any question, our email is right there. Feel free anytime, drop an email, and let's keep engaging. So from us here at IIDC, I'd like to just say that it's been great to have all of you on this call. And we shall be sharing the slides that our presenters have been projecting here. And we hope that you'll find them valuable. I would like to end with an African proverb that says that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. This platform is for us to get far, moving, holding each other's hand as we try to protect children from violence. And it would be good that we move together and we're able to go an extra mile each and every other day, each and every other month. So from us all here at IIDC, with my colleague Charles, the IT support, we want to appreciate you all for being on this call. And we wish you a very good afternoon and hope we keep connected. Thank you and bye. Kwaheri.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Good day.
Thank you.
Participants are still.
Not participants. Still in it.
There are more.
And then agree.
Me.
End the meeting.